I'm David Craig, a board-certified truck accident attorney, and these are the trucking truths. Trucking is the backbone of the supply chain in the United States of America. 70% of what we move from one place to the next is transported by trucks. And in 2026, we have a major problem. Now, many times and many things, and many lobbyists argue that the problem is we don't have enough drivers. That's not the problem. There are plenty of good qualified truck drivers. Many of them are getting out of the profession because of how bad the industry has gotten. It's a race to the bottom. And why is that? Well, this month we're going to explore that. But I can tell you, in summary, that the problems are we have unqualified, undocumented, ill-trained truck drivers flooding the market. As a result, the prices come down, the shippers and the brokers are paying less, people who are unqualified are taking those jobs. So as a result, we have the wrong drivers hauling merchandise. The equipment may be more dangerous or may be less well maintained, or the truck drivers behind the wheel aren't properly trained. And it's a huge problem endangering you and me and everybody else out on the highways. English Language Proficiency, ELP. What is that? Well, if you're in the trucking industry, you know what it is. Truck drivers are required by the rules to speak and read English. Now, that is a great rule. It's not because we don't like folks who don't speak or read English, but it's for safety reasons. It's critically important that people be able to read and understand and speak English if they're going to drive a semi on the roads of the United States of America. The reality is that when they come upon a construction zone, if you can't read those signs, then that is dangerous. When you take your truck into the shop and you're talking with the mechanics, if you don't understand what they're telling you, then that's dangerous. If you get an alert or you go into a shop and there's weather advisories and you don't understand what's being said, that is dangerous. I've talked to mechanics, I've talked to a lot of truck drivers, and they indicate that that is one of the biggest problems that they face. How did this happen? How did we get so many truck drivers that don't speak or read English? Well, the ATA, which is a trucking lobbying group, a trucking organization, they put out this message. And this message was, we don't have enough truck drivers. We need to lower the standards so that we can put more truck drivers behind the wheel. When in reality, that was never the case. There were plenty of qualified, good truck drivers. But you know what? A good truck driver costs you more money. A good truck driver is more expensive. A good truck driver won't tolerate driving on bad, dangerous, or unsafe equipment. So what happened was they started lowering the standard. This flooded the market. We had a bunch of truck drivers that shouldn't have been driving trucks. And as a result, good truck drivers weren't getting the loads because these folks were willing to take the loads for less money. As a result, President Trump in 2025 signed a proclamation to enforce the rule that was already there. And in 2025 and in the beginning of 2026, we're seeing that enforcement continue, and thousands of drivers are being pulled off the road. And when they're asked, when they're tested, they can't speak or read English, and they've been out there driving on the roadways. So in 2022, they started lowering the standards and making it easier for people to become truck drivers. The problem is trucking is an extraordinarily difficult and challenging job. It requires a lot of training and knowledge and experience. But what happened was that there was a group that was out lobbying and saying we don't have enough truck drivers. But in fact, I think they were just trying to lower the amount of money that trucking companies had to pay truck drivers. How do you lower the amount of money that you pay somebody in a profession? You flood the market with inexperienced, unqualified drivers who will work for less money. And so one of the things they did, they lowered the auditing of CDL schools. So a CDL school is a school where someone goes to learn how to become a professional truck driver. To be a professional truck driver, to be involved in interstate commerce, you have to have a CDL, a commercial driver's license. And those were extraordinarily difficult to come by. You had to be properly trained. You had to have experience. You had to go drive trucks. You had to pass tests. Well, they started making it easier for people to run CDL schools. Well, what happened was that you started having these schools that are created just to make money. They lowered the standards. They made it easier for people to take tests. They didn't require the same level of experience driving the trucks. They would take a test and they would gear it towards taking and passing a particular state test. Some states were making it easier than others. In fact, the federal government has come in and closed a lot of these schools, which we call CDL mills. But these CDL mills did damage. And they're currently investigating a whole bunch more. We need good, qualified, experienced truck drivers because all of our lives are endangered when you have these other dangerous, unqualified, untrained truck drivers. What is a non-domiciled CDL holder? Well, that's a truck driver who's gotten a CDL from another country. And then they were allowed into the United States because there was this impression that we didn't have enough drivers. Unfortunately, all of these truck drivers were not as experienced or as knowledgeable as United States truck drivers. Now, some were, but the problem is that, for example, I took a deposition of a truck driver from Mexico, and that truck driver was driving a semi-tractor trailer in the state of Indiana in the wintertime. His equipment was geared for warm weather. He serviced it in Texas. Well, his fifth wheel, the thing on the back of the tractor where the trailer hooks into it, it was greased for warm weather, not cold weather. And what happened was when he was making a left-hand turn at night onto a highway from a facility where he dropped his load, as he was making that turn, his fifth wheel became disconnected and he lost his trailer. The trailer was blocking the highway. When he pulled his tractor away, it cut off the power, so the lights on the trailer were gone. My client was driving down the road and didn't see the trailer, and he had a horrific injury and a horrific wreck. And it became clear when I took his deposition, and I took the deposition of the trucking company and the people who maintained the truck, that this man didn't know how to properly maintain a tractor and trailer for cold weather. So these non-domiciled drivers were creating a dangerous condition in the United States of America. And so now the federal government is cracking down on non-domiciled drivers. Now, I particularly don't care where someone comes from, but what I do care about is whether someone can drive safely. Our families are on the roadway, we're sharing the highways with these trucks, and it's critically important that the truck drivers that are behind the wheel are properly trained and they know how to drive regardless of what state they're driving in. And that's the truth.